Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Leon Vainstein speaking from Los Angeles, California. On Thursday, the Attorney General of Florida, in cooperation with the FBI, dozens of members of an organization supplying children to pedophiles were arrested. Supplying children to pedophiles. And more than 60 children were freed, whom the Biden administration, of course, allowed to be brought into the United States and then handed over to the organizers of brothels and children's tolerance houses. But
it was a 2-week operation. I was told that this is the most successful case in United States history. We managed to save 60 children, many of whom were victims of terrible human trafficking, and others, just atrocities. Many of them became pregnant by their traffickers. Oh yes, well we're glad to bring them home. We worked with the federal government. I can't help but mention how much the Trump administration, the FBI, and the United States Marshal Service helped. They really did a good deed, so we brought them back, and now we'll help them recover. And, I promised people when I was sworn in that protecting our children is my top priority. We won't stop, we will fight back. And if you're involved in human trafficking in this state, we will catch you.
this is just the tip of the iceberg. The Democrats handed over about 300,000 children into the hands of pedophiles, and naturally only 60 were found. We will have to deal with the nightmare that the Democrats created in this country for many years to come. It's just a nightmare.
A nightmare. We are not going to tolerate this, and we are not going to apologize for protecting our children from physical harm. This is human trafficking, it's dangerous, and it's coming from ideological pests. Here in the state, we put together a curriculum. We will punish anyone who allows little boys to enter women's restrooms, anyone who wants pornography in classrooms.
Meme.
There is no place for that in Florida. We will become the #1 state for public safety.
And those who were involved in child exploitation will be held in a new place. In the middle of the swampy prairie full of alligators, it's even called Crocodile Al-Cat. Well, you might know that there was a famous prison in San Francisco surrounded by the waters of Alcatraz, but this one is surrounded by crocodiles.
A few institutions, including what I call the alligator Alcatraz.
So wait a second, and we have it right here. Yeah, this is the place. This is the medium-sized big airfield. That's right?
This is an old, almost abandoned airfield. At some point, they wanted this to be the biggest airport in the world, but that didn't happen. But it does have a runway that's 11,000 feet long, so big planes can land there. We'll be doing the processing there. The National Guard will be on site, they'll be helping, and we'll provide them with all the procedural safeguards that the courts say they need. In the end, even though nobody
Cared when
the border was open and people could cross freely, and we will detain, deport, and expel people from this country. It's amazing.
So, you're here. How are you? Wait. You just said you would open it in July?
Yes, it will be open in the first week of July.
Are you just going to put up tents or canopies there? How
How will it work? In Florida, we learn to respond well.
are you going to chain people to an alligator? Yeah, no.
We will have some light infrastructure, but a lot of, heavy tent structures, trailer structures. We don't need to build a bunch of bricks and mortar. Wow. Again, this will be temporary, and fortunately, Mother Nature does a lot around the perimeter. We'll need a few additions, but there's really nowhere to add them. If you've been placed there, if you've been detained there, then there's no way in or out.
everything is ready, mobile homes, lightweight structures for 5,000 beds for criminals, alligators around, and a runway to transport them right from there. From this Alcatraz, they'll be sent to the countries from which the criminals arrived for long sentences in the prisons of San Salvador and other Guatemalas. 600,000 illegals. Ladies and gentlemen, in the United States of America, they have already been sentenced to be sent to prison. What does that mean? It means they have already committed a crime in the United States of America. 600,000 people, out of those whom Baden let in here, 10 million, 12 million, different numbers are mentioned all the time. 600,000 have already committed a crime here and were released. Now we have to catch them again. They didn't commit their crimes somewhere else. They might have. Maybe that's why they were kicked out from there, brought to our border, pushed back so they wouldn't cross here, and did the same things they did there. But now it's here. Biden's people welcomed them gladly, happily helped them, gave them everything they could, including money, tickets, and so on, but they didn't take them out or move them anywhere at all.
But then it's necessary to ensure the rule of law is upheld. If you are in this country illegally, you don't belong here, and we are obligated to support the Trump administration. Let me give you an example. 2 weeks ago, I announced a life sentence for a guy who was here on an agricultural work permit. He overstayed his time in the country and was here illegally. And we caught him committing brutal sexual assault and trafficking young girls. A little child. I mean, that's exactly what happens when these people come to our country. Last week in Bay County, I announced this driver's license scheme, where people working at the Department of Motor Vehicles were selling fake IDs. Including, those very licenses that are required to drive a semi-truck. Wow, really? People who don't go through training, don't pass exams, they get these documents, make money off it by bypassing the law, and put Florida residents at risk. They put Americans in danger. So, I believe we have a duty. We must detain and deport everyone. Yes, we will focus on criminals among the illegal immigrants, but the law must be the law.
So is this direct election fraud? Right, there is. Well, there is. Come on, let's bring it in. Millions of illegal driver's licenses so that Chinese students could vote. And we know that Chinese students really did vote in the elections. Some guys already being charged in Michigan for this. So the scheme actually worked. And then there's even more aggressive election fraud, which is simply to go and kill the candidate. Now, one of these assassination attempts happened here in Florida. I understand that this is a federal case and it's being tried in federal court. Can you tell me anything about Ryan Rout? What's going on with this guy anyway? He was kind of working with Ukraine, kind of working with Afghanistan, with someone from the terrorists.
There are a lot of facts that raise even more questions. Exactly. Then what? Answers?
What the hell? Sakin.
But what can I say? We were held accountable in Florida. As long as the Biden administration is in power, it's a threat. We didn't trust the federal government and didn't trust it to do its job, so we wanted to do it in Florida. And they obstructed our investigation. They didn't let us onto the crime scene. They didn't share witness statements or evidence documents. But everything changed when Attorney General Bondi and Kash Patel came to power. We enjoyed working with them. We managed to make progress in our investigation. Now we fully support their actions. We don't want to do anything that could get ahead of them or interfere with what they're doing. But we will once again seek to uphold the law.
That is, under Biden, the feds were doing everything they could to obstruct the investigation being conducted by the Florida prosecutor's office. The question is why? Why weren't they allowed to access the crime scene? Why weren't the materials shown? Why were some witness testimonies hidden? Meanwhile, on the other shore, so that shore is Florida, New York, Boston, and so on, and this shore is the other one. That's where I live, in a small town near Los Angeles. Vice Mayor Cynthia.
Gonzalez Cynthia, the Vice...
President Cynthia.
Gonzalez, the Vice Mayor of the city of Kudai. Since then, she has deleted a video from social media in which she called on gang members to defend their territory from immigration and customs enforcement.
This may be the first time in American history that a city vice mayor has called on local gangs to fight federal agents to protect their streets.
When a political leader calls on street criminal groups to take action, it takes on a much more sinister and possibly even criminal meaning.
Alright. In this video, we will watch a speech by Cynthia Gonzalez, the vice mayor of the city of Cudahy, California.
Not just because, but I'm curious, where are all the cholos in Los Angeles? 18th Street, Florence, where's the leadership? Because you're all about territory. This is 18th Street, this is Florence. You paint everything around, claiming your neighborhood, and now, when your neighborhood has been taken over by the biggest gang, not a word from all the others. Those who aren't involved in gang life are out protesting and speaking up.
It's not about gang life.
We're there, like, fighting for our territory, protecting our neighborhood, protecting our people. And where are you?
Alright, please leave your comments below, tell us what you think about all this, and don't worry, we have a lot more videos coming up. This elected official is literally calling on local gang leaders to reclaim their territory, to go and fight back against the biggest gang of all, the United States government.
Compare the Florida prosecutor and this, well, I don't want to say the word, but this California administrator. Well, it's the same thing, right? One is for upholding the law, protecting residents, ensuring freedom of action and speech for citizens. The other is for protecting the gangs of Los Angeles, their territory, their turf, as she called it, meaning their area, right? They sell drugs there and run protection for prostitutes, including minors, and they defend that territory, consider it their own. Protection from whom? Protection from the law. God forbid the law comes to her district. How could that be? Who would vote for her if there was law there? That's how it is here in the United States, too. Two banks of the same river.
We're trying kind of to help and get organized, and I don't want to hear a word from you when they leave. And you start claiming this is your neighborhood. It wasn't your neighborhood. You weren't even here to help.
Again, I don't know if we've ever seen anything like this. We have an elected official posting videos online trying to make a deal, or inciting local violent gangs to go and fight the biggest gang on the streets and take back their territory.
Honestly, I've never seen an idiot like this before. I've seen different kinds of idiots, but never one like this, and maybe I'll never see one again. I think she's the best advertisement for those who are trying to fight against the Democrats in America. She should be shown everywhere and to everyone. And at the end, right, if you agree, vote for the Democrats.
Well, David and Michelle, people here in Kadak tell me that they are scared. The tension is very high. So when the vice mayor sends a message that is not addressed to her constituents, not addressed to immigration and customs enforcement agents, but directed at local gangsters, those we spoke to say that it only made the situation worse.
By the way, subscribe to this channel and to the Roadmap to Freedom. There will be a link below to my gift for you, ladies and gentlemen. The book that received highly positive reviews from Rudy Giuliani, Sarah Palin, and many other public figures. And, by the way, a brilliant review was written in the London Book Review. And a free book, a free subscription to the video course Roadmap to Freedom. Daily ones will be sent. You'll get the book right away, and then they'll start coming the next day. So to speak, 10-minute videos every day. These are interesting video stories about a world we would like to live in, about the world of the golden rule of Rav Gilel, who preceded Jesus' Sermon on the Mount by exactly 100 years. But let's get back to today and now.
A shocking message about the raids was posted on social media by elected official Cynthia Gonzalez, who serves as vice mayor of the small city of Cudahy, located in the southeastern part of Los Angeles County. This message is not for the federal government. It is addressed to one of the most violent street gangs in Southern California.
Who was little Cynthia calling to protect the streets of our city? What kind of knights in shining armor?
Alright, 18th Street Gang, in case you didn't know, this is one of the largest gangs in Los Angeles. But I also want to draw attention to this because many people don't notice it. I believe that this elected official not only called on the 18th Street Gang to stand up against the United States government, but also incited them and showed disrespect. And he said, "Hey, where are you? Why aren't you out on the streets? Where is your leadership? Are you afraid to be here with us?" And listen, you don't mess around with these gangs. And to be honest with you, this could become a problem, not only for the United States government, but also for the local gangs.
The bitch is trying to claim territory that doesn't belong to any gang. If you don't show up, you're not even trying to help.
The video, which lasted more than a minute, has since been deleted. EVR cannot confirm or deny an investigation regarding Gonzalez's statements. But legal analyst Sem Josh Ritter believes that the deputy mayor's call to action may have crossed the line of the law.
When it comes to a political leader calling street gangs to action, it takes on a much more sinister meaning and possibly even a criminal undertone. I mean, it's one thing to say, residents of the neighborhood, stand up for yourselves. It's a completely different thing to name specific street gangs and ask them to defend their neighborhood.
Even the Democrats started giving up our beautiful city. You see, it's one thing to call for a people's peaceful, sometimes even an uprising, but it's another thing to call in mercenaries and even bandits. Well, honestly, almost all, or maybe all mercenaries. I think all mercenaries are bandits. If you don't know yet, I want to introduce you to one of the brightest minds in America, if not the brightest. This is Tomas Sonov, who has answered the question several times. For what? Why? Who hates Jews? At the same time, please note he is definitely not Jewish.
Middleman minorities, of which the Jews are the most prominent? Because among the so-called middleman minorities to which Jews belong, it is most pronounced. Hostility toward these people in different countries around the world is completely disproportionate compared to any other group I can think of. When it comes to violence, for example, the number of Chinese people killed in a single year as a result of mob actions exceeds the total number of black people lynched in the entire history of the United States. And the number of Armenians killed in Turkey during World War I is even greater. And of course, the number of Jews killed at different times in history, even before the Holocaust, is even higher. So the question is, why does this particular type of people become the target of such poisonous hatred? And it seems to me the answer is that they don't just achieve success. They do it in a way that threatens the self-esteem of other people. In my opinion, hit the nail on the head. So it really seems that most people are right when they have a choice between hating others or hating others.
If you think about it, everything starts with an idea. Everything starts with an invention. Chairs don't grow on trees, and if you haven't noticed, check, they don't grow. Someone has to imagine and describe a chair to themselves. Then he made tools, and with their help from wood, he made a bench. And then, seeing how much people liked it, how many people wanted to have one, everyone needed it. He calculated the costs, set a price, and started receiving the difference, which he called profit. The same thing happened with music. He composed it in his head, then played it on an instrument, or recorded it, or sang it to others, and it took off. Those who can think better, those who can calculate, those who can organize, live better than those who just blindly seized land. Or by using punishment and intimidation, they force semi-slaves to work for their own benefit. And Jews don't force anyone to listen to their music or buy their benches. Jews do their own thing, and many other minorities and majorities want the same as they have and are willing to give the fruits of their labor for it. It's called money to get what the Jews are selling. Jews have never come and said, "Give us your property or your money." On the contrary, people came to them and asked, "How much is this and how much is that?"
How much? Here. In many places. But these are people who have achieved tremendous success among others who did not succeed. Many years ago, an official from one of the Jewish organizations in New York asked me, well, what can Jews themselves do to minimize the hostility they face? And I gave him a straightforward answer: fail. Because as long as you are successful, you will be hated. So the source is success and hatred. It's not just about success. It's about success that starts from poverty, like it was for Jews in the United States and in many other countries. And here they are you. You not only see how they achieve success, you see how they rise from the very bottom, overtaking other people, and those they've overtaken don't like it. But there's also the fact that their economic role has never been understood. It's, well, they're middlemen or moneylenders, and people say that they don't actually produce anything. You don't see anything tangible, that they don't stand on an assembly line and don't produce any products. And that's why people claim that they don't produce anything. They just shamelessly insert themselves between the producer and the consumer, and essentially are parasites. And this argument has been made, again, not only about Jews, but also about similar groups all over the world. And in many places, these people were expelled or pushed out through pogroms, forced to flee. And after they left, the economy collapsed.
It doesn't matter at all that there are plenty of Jews among the left as well. It's an individual philosophy, and any Jew can, so to speak, believe in one thing or another, or even a third. Actually, evidence, please. Communism and socialism were created by Jews. There's Marx, Engels, many Bolsheviks and Mensheviks. They also created and support capitalism. Well, let's take a look at today, yeah. Well, there. Jeff Bezos from Amazon, Bill Gates from Microsoft, Larry Ellis from Oracle, Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook, Sergey Brin from Google. And it doesn't matter what their personal political views are. What matters is that capitalism today relies on them. Think about it. 0.2% of the world's population, 0.2%. Jews today make up approximately 0.2%. They have created 15% of all the world's wealth. Not 2%, 0.2% have created 15% of all the wealth on the planet. You see, it's impossible to compare the contribution of Jews, so to speak, per person, with, say, rosy-cheeked Koreans, French, Somalians, Ugandans, Kuwaitis, or Vietnamese. I don't know, with everyone, just with everyone. Why are Jews so smart? Or as my granddaughter says, why are you so smart? She doesn't really understand the difference between why and for what reason. That's a completely different question. Right now, we're discussing why Jews have been hated for at least 2,000 years, maybe even longer.
Let's start with the fact that many people misunderstand the economic role that Jews have played throughout history. In many places, Jews ended up in professions that others didn't want to take. They became merchants, bankers, and most often moneylenders. Now you might ask, why did they take up these particular professions? Was it their choice? Not exactly. In medieval Europe, Christians were forbidden by their religion to lend money with interest. This was called usury. But economic life couldn't exist without credit. Therefore, Jewish communities, who were forbidden to own land or practice many crafts, filled this niche. They lent money, financed businesses, and became crucial cogs in the economic machine. But there was also a downside. People who borrowed from them, farmers, shopkeepers, often didn't understand the economics of their debts. When hard times came and they couldn't pay back the debt, they blamed the lender. To them, the Jew became the face of their misfortune, the person who profited from their suffering. These tense relations were not limited to medieval Europe alone. The role of Jews as financial intermediaries was found in many parts of the world, from Poland to Spain and the Middle East. In any society, an intermediary is both necessary and vulnerable at the same time. They connect buyers with sellers, lenders with borrowers. But when something goes wrong, it's easiest to blame them. However, the economic reasons were only part of the story. Religion also played a crucial role. After all, Judaism was one of the first monotheistic religions, and that made Jews special in a world dominated by polytheism and later by Christianity and Islam. And the sad truth is that when people see others who live differently, believe differently, it is often followed by fear and suspicion.
How can we avoid envy and hatred? Stop being successful, start being like everyone else, dumb fools, and people will stop hating you. By the way, have you ever wondered why people hate America?
Of being accused of desecrating holy objects in alliance with the devil. These myths led to brutal pogroms, expulsions, and mass killings. Entire communities were wiped out because of baseless rumors and religious hysteria. Jews had to flee from country to country again and again, constantly adapting to new lands, new languages, and new suspicions. And yet, despite all this, Jews not only survived, they thrived. Wherever they found themselves, they built businesses, schools, and communities. They became doctors, scientists, merchants, and craftsmen. They made tremendous contributions to the culture and economy of the countries they lived in, even while remaining outsiders. Well, just think about it. If a group of people can survive centuries of oppression and still give the world some of the greatest minds in science, art, and business, maybe that's something to admire. But being outsiders came at a price. Periods of stability saw Jews tolerated, sometimes even welcomed, but in times of crisis, they were the first to be blamed. This is what we call a scapegoat, a group that gets blamed for the misfortunes of others. When the Black Plague swept across Europe in the 14th century, Jews were blamed for its spread. When Germany's economy collapsed in the 20th century, Hitler's regime blamed the Jews simply because of who they were. Hitler used old prejudices and economic anxiety to fuel hatred that led to the Holocaust. The murder of 6 million Jews simply because of who they were. It was the ultimate act of scapegoating, a monstrous crime that grew out of centuries of misunderstanding, lies, and fear. But here's what's most remarkable about the history of the Jewish people. Despite everything, the Jewish people continue to thrive. After the horrors of the Holocaust, Jews rebuilt their communities, their culture, and even their homeland. Today, Jews contribute to science, technology, literature, and the arts, enriching all of humanity.
Brilliant speech. Gentlemen, America and Israel are hated for the same reason Jews are hated, for their success. Because Israel has been in a constant state of war for 80 years, without any oil, importing everything needed for production. Israel has become the most successful country in the Middle East, the freest, the most human-friendly, and the one with the strongest rule of law. Even though there are terrible things happening there too, but what we call terrible is nothing compared to what's happening in Uganda. I don't know, in Jordan and so on. It's unbelievable for the Middle East. The standard of living of the population is unbelievable. I'm not talking about oligarchs or padishahs or whatever you want to call them. Yes, America, the dream, yes, but at the same time, it's the envy and hatred of the whole world. Caption, the destruction of the leftist movement.
I've never really been a Democrat. I've always, cooperated with Democrats and usually voted for them. I think I've always voted for them, but I always look at it this way. No, I really make the decision myself. They just always seem less scary and crazy than the Republicans. But I'm waiting for the day when everything evens out. We're getting closer to that because they've gotten even crazier. Bill Maher,
one of the icons of the leftist movement. For example, when you ask who on the left side isn't a complete psycho, usually people quickly say Bill, Mayer, and Bill after meeting with Trump at the White House and talking to the hysterics from the Democratic Party, started to be shocked by his fellow party members.
Is there even more madness happening on the left? That's right. And that's closer to home. It's in schools, it's something like that, just like Trump. Yeah, he was bad, and he probably shouldn't have done what he did when he was impeached over Ukraine. And, all of that democracy, it's not that, but it's, they're kind of out of this world. What they don't like about the Democrats is much closer to home. And I think that's what a lot of it comes down to. And they see Trump as the one who stands between the madness and, that's it. That's who he is for them, a bulwark.
Fareed Sanan is also not the worst, by the way, not the dumbest, actually very smart, I would even say. But he can't, like Maher, show that he has doubts because he's not a star like Maher. He would get fired for doubting.
The issue with colleges that we see with attacks on Israel and Jews is I see that Sam Bankman-Fried was found guilty, and then I read about his parents, who are both professors at Stanford. 15 years ago, I would have said 15 years ago, I would have said this. Yeah, how could something like this happen to the child of two Stanford professors? Friends, you just
Can't imagine what Bill Maher's words mean. I might vote for the Republicans next time. It means that millions of his listeners and viewers will say to themselves, somehow I also stopped feeling obligated to vote for the Democrats. Let me take a look. I never was a
Democrat to begin with. I was never a Democrat at all. I always, cooperated with Democrats and usually voted for them. I think I always voted for them, but I always look at it this way. No, I really make the decision myself. They just always seem less scary and crazy than the Republicans. But I'm waiting for the day when everything evens out. We're getting closer to that because they've gotten even crazier. Belly told the truth.
Bill Maher is risking that part of his audience will leave. But he's always been honest. I often thought he was wrong, but he sincerely believed it. So, in my opinion, he's not particularly wise. Smart, but not wise. Those are different things, but he's honest. And by the way, he knows how to explain things well, to tell stories, to present his point of view. Bill Maher's demonstrative departure from liberal phraseology, even from the ritual slogans of the Democratic Party, personally, it makes me very happy. Bill is an influencer, in the full sense of the word, for an all-American audience. In other words, an influencer on a nationwide American scale. And when he changes his views, it affects a lot of people. Well, and now.
Today we have even more material for you about the ridiculous and comical civil war that the Democratic Party is currently stuck in. And as I often say, this is essentially a false choice. Because no matter who wins, whether it's the aging, corrupt party leadership, or on the other hand, the new, young, progressive, radical, but also corrupt wing of the Democratic Party, in any case, their agenda leads to the ultimate destruction of America, whether it's quickly through progressive initiatives or slowly through the neoliberal, failed policies of the establishment. Either way, they're finished. But at the very least, it's quite an amusing situation. And of course, the leadership of the Democratic Party and the donor class are literally in a panic right now because of this unhinged socialist Mr. Zeran Mamdani.
A communist popped up, smiling, apparently not a foolish careerist who doesn't care at all about what he promises. After all, it's not his responsibility, right? But how will this play out across the whole country? That's the question for 2026.
At the same time, I understand, on some level, where does this panic among the Democrats come from? Because if we're talking about the midterm elections of 2026, and about the prospect that such inadequate radicals as Zeran could run primaries against other incumbent Democrats, and by the way, not necessarily only in such deep blue areas as New York, right? Imagine a catastrophic situation. In a key race for a seat in the House of Representatives, the Senate, or even for governor, a crazy radical progressive appears who completely destroys the Democrats' chances in 2026. That's where the source of panic comes from. Many leaders and sponsors of the Democratic Party are panicking because of Zeran Mamdani, a 33-year-old Democratic socialist who won the party's nomination for the next mayor of New York. And that makes sense. You should be panicking because you let this guy defeat a powerful political dynasty in your party. There's something to that. About the incompetence of the Democratic establishment leadership, which allows for disgraceful defeats. By the way, the approval rating is 20%, including your own base. Yes, maybe all of this really does make sense, but still, why is it important here? Well, as you know, establishment Democrats are trying to recover after the party's defeats in 2024. And they're worried that Mamdani could damage the party's image on a national level. Meanwhile, young progressives believe that his approach could spread beyond New York. You're being forced into a false choice in the Civil War among Democrats. So, on some level it's true that Mamdani is clearly not the best national image for the Democratic Party. Try to imagine it in the states of Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. It's not a fact that it will work the same way there. At the same time, is it even possible to damage the image of the Democratic Party on a national level more than they've already done to themselves? Considering the approval rating is at 20%.
Let's break it down. The Democratic Party has support of 20 plus, well, no more than 30%. Which means that some of their own party members don't support the tried and tested fraudsters. That's their leadership. That's what I call the new tribe. These are the communists who sympathize with Islam. We've felt this interesting twist for a long time, but now a whole bunch of them just popped up one after another. For some reason, there are 3 or 4 girls in Congress, and now, here you go, a candidate for mayor. Yeah, with these views, they don't even have a 20% chance. In Middle America, but in the big coastal cities, well, Boston, Chicago, not exactly the coast, but still, New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, where there are a lot of freeloaders and a lot of Berkeley graduates. Yeah, kind of. That is, people with messed up and brainwashed minds. I don't know which comes first. First they were brainwashed, then messed up. Or maybe first messed up, then brainwashed. And they've been completely taught not to think. I'm saying this with full responsibility. Outside of their professions, their narrow professions, they were carefully taught not to doubt. And when you stop doubting, you stop thinking. That is, in these snake pits, our left radical communo-Islamist outposts, they have a chance. Which means a complete failure of the Democratic Party in the general elections, because only a fool can support the Democratic Party today. Well, by the way, it just occurred to me, besides a fool, maybe also a donkey, a jackal, a hyena, and that's it.
According to Politico reports, some Democrats in the House of Representatives are concerned that Mamdani's success could inspire new challengers in the primaries against incumbent Democrats, who see their campaigns as a referendum on age and complacency. As I already mentioned, this is the real reason for panic among the leadership and donors at the national level. This is the biggest risk that Mamdani poses. It's not just that Andrew Kuma won't win, or that New York will stay the way it was before, but that now everything will get even worse. The city will turn into something anarchic, chaotic, filled with crime. Hey, into a real nightmare from which many businesses will leave, and so on and so on. But if you look at the midterm elections, if this Mamdani basically becomes the national face of the Democratic Party, and this will lead to many similar stories and situations in 2026. And there are already figures like David Hawk and other young party leaders who are leading a similar revolution. So you can imagine a situation where, in the end, a bunch of unelectable crazy fanatics. Although, as I said before, I'm not sure they're much worse than the current establishment representatives. But that's not the point, basically. It will just hand over the 2026 midterm elections to MAGA and the Republican Party.
To finish this topic, in the Democratic Party, senile people are running the leadership. These are the same kind of cowardly thieves. Not much different from Biden's such shy thieves. Unlike, say, Obama, who wasn't a shy thief. But it's not young Democrats like Kennedy or even Roosevelt who are trying to replace them. Yes, by the way, God forbid, but these are the ones who are communists with burning eyes and open mouths. That means taking everything away, controlling everything, imprisoning everyone, removing, evicting. And then there are the old folks who, honestly, have always had a hard time giving up power. Even when they were young, they seized it, and now they really don't want to let it go. They watch in horror as the very wolves they raised themselves. They thought they were just joking. They thought everyone understood they were lying. Everyone understood that they were playing games. But they raised those who would tear, rip everything and everyone to pieces, just to raise the banner of victory over the Reichstag. But at the same time, they plan to burn that same Reichstag to the ground. At the same time, of course, as I've said many times, the Democratic Party must disappear. Well, they're all at a dead end. They have to disappear, turning into a small, insignificant party, like the Greens, the Green Party, that's it. But in its place, there should be a second pro-capitalist, pro-free market, pro-freedom, pro-individualism party. A party that will reflect the views of those people who disagree with the Republicans on some issues or want to achieve, let's say, the same kind of life, but in a different way. Because there are plenty of ways, well, not plenty, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5. There are paths you can take. From my point of view, there's only one, but that's not what we're discussing right now. So let's say the Libertarian Party with their views, I support about 80%, maybe 85%, yeah, but there's about 15% I don't really agree with, or the party. I remembered scientific capitalism. You all remember scientific communism, right? But this one isn't based on nonsense like that. That's why I couldn't study. Not because I was some ideological opponent, I just couldn't study because it was complete nonsense. The math just wouldn't add up there. By that time, I had already read Hegel. Nietzsche, Montaigne, and the like, and here they were making me study this nonsense. It was terrible, yeah. I barely got out of that situation. There you go. And this party that is supposed to emerge, it should be based on common sense, like Thomas Paine's book, Common Sense, and on common sense in general. Well then, ladies and gentlemen, the most important thing is that what this party proposes should not be contrary to human nature. We just need to create conditions where actions that are good for society are well rewarded and those that are not very good, to put it mildly destructive, should be punished. And punished financially, so to speak. Then we'll see when there's an incentive which direction we'll all go. Goodbye and see you next time.